إدارة بايدن لم تنجح في إعادة إيران إلى الاتفاقية النووية رغم كل الإغراءات التي قدمت لها. الجمهورية الإيرانية الإسلامية اختلف وضعها في الأشهر الأخيرة بعد انتفاضة نساء إيران أمام الطغيان، فالمرأة الإيرانية دفعت الإدارة الأمريكية إلى إعادة النظر في كيفية التعامل مع النظام السائد. لكن التخوف الأكبر أمريكيا إسرائيليا وخليجيا هو من اقتراب إيران من الحصول على القنبلة النووية. للمزيد حول هذا الموضوع ينضم إلينا من واشنطن وفي لقاء حصري المبعوث الاميركي الخاص لإيران روبرت مالي. Thanks for joining us, Mr. Mali. How close is Iran to a bomb right now?
Thanks for having me. It's a very important question, but I think it has to be answered in two different ways. There's a question of how close they are to having enough weapons-grade uranium, and they are very close, only a handful of weeks away. But that's very different from how close they are to getting a bomb, to weaponizing, and that I can't give a number here, but they're not as close as that. And so I think our focus has been on the enrichment, the enriched uranium. That's what we want to stop, and that's what our negotiations have been about. But of course, the other angle is how long it would take them to weaponize, which would be significantly longer.
How to stop Iran for becoming a nuclear power? Is the military option on the table?
So I can't do better than repeat what President Biden has said consistently, that number one, that he will not allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon. Number two, he believes that diplomacy is by far the best and most sustainable way to achieve that goal, and that's why we've been pursuing that path since President Biden came into office. But number three, that if diplomacy fails because Iran is not open to diplomatic settlement, then all other options will be on the table, and President Biden made that very clear not that long ago.
Mr. Mali, can we say, after all these months, that you failed personally to revive the nuclear deal, and it is far to happen anytime soon?
It's not a matter of success or failure. We have an objective, which is to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon, and we hope that we could achieve that goal through diplomatic means. Right now, our focus, of course, as you know, is on other issues. It's on the brutal repression by the Iranian regime of protesters who are simply demanding fundamental rights, and the very dangerous transfer by Iran of weapons that Russia is using in its brutal war of aggression against Ukraine. So we still believe in a diplomatic path, but our focus is on those other elements which I just mentioned.
Since you mentioned this very important development inside Iran, after seeing the ongoing protests in Iran, does the U.S. support a regime change?
Again, we've spoken to this from the outset. Our support is for the fundamental rights, the fundamental dignity, human rights and dignity of the Iranian people. And that's what we stand behind, as we stand behind those aspirations across the globe. Our policy is not a policy of regime change. Our policy is one of supporting the fundamental rights of the Iranian people. And the Iranian regime may want to say that we and other countries are seeking to topple the regime. That's the usual playbook that they will trot out whenever their own people are demonstrating against them. It is not our policy.
How the U.S. is helping the protesters to defend their fundamental rights as protesting for their human rights and other issues?
So the first thing that we've done is that we've shined a spotlight on what's happening, because this is a regime that has tried to hide to the world what is happening, the protests, and more than that, the brutal crackdown against the protests. And so we've been from day one making sure that people know what's happening and that the regime can't hide it. We've also taken steps to hold the regime accountable through sanctions, which are not just U.S. sanctions. You're seeing countries across the globe, including as recently as today, impose sanctions against those up and down the chain in Iran who are either ordering or implementing the human rights violations. Today you'll hear of sanctions against members of the law enforcement forces that have committed atrocious human rights violations. We've also taken steps to make sure that our own sanctions are not going to stand in the way of the ability of Iranians to communicate with each other and with the outside world. So we've made sure that our sanctions are not an obstacle. And finally, we've come together with other countries across the globe, and it's not just Western countries, which again is something that the Iranian regime would like to portray. It's countries from north and south, east and west, that believe in the fundamental rights of the Iranian people and who are outraged by the crackdown, by the other day, we saw the first execution of a very young 20s Iranian who, in a sham trial, was convicted and then executed. That's something that you're seeing people across the globe be outraged about. So we're going to do all that. We're going to work with our partners to hold the regime accountable and keep a spotlight so that they know that they cannot hide what they're doing.
Robert Mali, thanks for doing this from Washington DC. كل الاحتمالات مفتوحة على مصراعيها، والجميع يترقب سلوك إيران في المرحلة المقبلة التي تحاول إيجاد حل الأزمة الداخلية ولما يتعلق بالسلاح النووي.